Hello, and welcome to the Build Your Perfect College List program. We're about to start Module 1, but before we do that, I'd just like to set some groundwork. For years, people have been asking us where to start when it comes with the process. Many can feel overwhelmed and a little bit stressed about where to start and making sure that they're actually doing all that they can to make sure that their child and their family will go through the process and have a successful journey as they get from the beginning, wherever that may be, to a final destination of where your child's going to go to school. And this is going to help you get there. The Build Your Perfect College List program is going to bring you step by step through the process to make sure that you minimize the uncertainty and go into the process with confidence that you're hopefully going to achieve the results that you, your family, and your student desire. We have to start with the financial fit factors because just like a home, that sets the foundation for everything else that follows. Too many times we see people go through this process and come to us for help when it's too late, after their student has already applied, asking questions about why their child, their family did not get the money that they would require to be able to afford the schools their child's gotten accepted to. We absolutely would like to minimize that uncertainty and ensure the fact that you, your family, and your student are in the right position to achieve admission success when all is said and done. So Module 1 goals is with the Building Your Perfect College List program, we know that it requires an understanding of how financial aid works, and we're going to explain that to you. In addition, we're also going to challenge some rumors and myths regarding financial aid. I'm sure you've heard a lot of things. I'm sure a lot of people may have said that you won't qualify or your family makes too much money. Don't bother going through the process. You might put your child at a disadvantage if you apply for financial aid. And none of those things are necessarily accurate or true. So we're going to address those in some detail as well. We're also going to help you to identify your family's fit factors, the financial fit factors. You have to have a conversation with your family and understand where you are from a financial perspective, what you have available versus how you can fill that gap in order to make the colleges that your child's applying to a reality. We're going to talk to you about Module 1 worksheets, but we would like you to complete them. And really, what you really should do before each one of these modules is you should really print out the worksheets and have them next to you so you can go along with the program and fill things out. Because remember, this module by module program is not a sprint. It's not something you have to get done in 2 days. If you can and you want to allocate that time, then that's fine. But this is not meant to be a race or a sprint. What this is meant to be is to help you take the steps that you need to take one at a time at your convenience to go through the modules and get closer and closer to building your perfect college list. In addition, remember, you do it once, you have access to this program. That doesn't mean you can't go back to modules and do them over again or reevaluate your list and your criteria if things change in your family. Things change academically, things change on a non-academic basis, or things might change from a financial perspective. So this is not a one and done program. You will have access to this and you can go through these modules at any time at the pace that you desire to make sure that you're making progress through the process. We're also going to help you understand how you can calculate your EFC. And many of you probably have heard that term before, but don't worry if you haven't. We're going to explain what it is, how it's calculated, and even give you a tool to figure out the same specific to your family. And then we're really going to try to encourage you to have family discussions to understand the role that financial aid will play in your student's ability to attend a college. It's no different from buying a house, buying a car, buying a business, and for that matter, even going out for dinner, although college is obviously a lot more expensive. You don't want to get the bill and not be able to pay it. You don't want to see that the schools that your child has gotten accepted to are outside of your budget. It's all can be very frustrating to go through the process that way. And we unfortunately see many people who address the modules content that we're going to discuss with you in this program, unfortunately, after they apply versus before. So you're in the right place, and we're very happy to get going with this. And please take your time and ask the questions internally, as well as with the resources we're going to recommend, to make sure that you're making the right progress with this program. So let's start by discussing the biggest mistakes many families make. When it comes to financial aid, many do not understand the impact it will have on making a final college decision. Number one, a lot of families, a lot of students apply to colleges that are not within their budget. You know, the college process, I absolutely understand as a parent myself, how it can be a little bit of an emotional process. For our children, we want to provide them the best that we possibly can. And sometimes it's hard to tell them no. But when it comes to college, college is going to be one of, most likely, the most expensive investments that you make in your lifetime. Different from buying a pair of shoes or a handbag or any of those type things, the cost is definitely very significant. So understanding how colleges address financial aid, and as well, doing a little bit of a personal inventory to understand what you have as a family to allocate towards college is very, very important. We're going to help you to avoid that number one problem of applying to colleges that are not within your budget. Number two, many families wait until after their student applies to estimate what they can afford. And again, I said this a little bit earlier, but it's not the fun part. It's not the glamorous part of the process, and we understand that. However, you have to go in eyes wide open into this process. You need to understand how much a college costs and how you can come up with the dollars that you're going to need to between what they may offer or not and what you have available or not. Number three, letting bumper sticker envy drive their college list creation. This is very, very big, and we will talk about this throughout every module. Many students, as well as parents, get caught up in the quote unquote reputation of a school. I always say that it's not beneficial to have a bumper sticker on your car that is going to impress your neighbors or family, only to have to scrape it off after the first semester. Now, does that happen sometimes? It does. It's not the end of the world, but it can be avoided if you do the right homework and you follow these modules closely. You have the conversations and you identify the criteria that is critical for you and your family and to set your student up for future success. There are many, many great schools out there, so please don't let ratings and rankings and supposed reputation alone drive your process. Number four, overestimating the academic achievement of their student. We all have great kids. That's absolutely true. Some students are higher end students than others when it comes to GPA and ACT and SAT scores. No matter what level your child is at, you can absolutely have your child qualify for financial aid on a need base, maybe, depending on your income and assets, but also from a merit perspective. They don't need to be a 4.7 on a 4.0 scale student in order to be able to qualify for some kind of financial aid. But that's where, again, you need to make sure that your child's applying to the right schools. On the other end of the spectrum, for you who may have a very high achieving student, that's great. But you have to understand, with grade inflation and ACT and SAT inflation of results, lots of competition at all schools right now is going on in the college industry. And also, some of the more selective schools do not offer merit aid, no matter what grades or ACT or SAT score your child has. So you need to understand that before you apply, how the school addresses financial aid. This is probably the fifth time I've said this, but it's really, really important. So you don't end up saying, I don't understand. I thought my child was so smart. She got in, but they didn't give her any money. Number 5, expecting colleges to give you, the family, money for whatever you can't afford. You need to understand that it is not the college's obligation to fill the gap for you. And by the way, some colleges are better at it than others. But if they do fill that gap, many will give you or offer you loans, which probably is not what you were looking for. So you can't expect colleges to give you money to fill your gap. You need to understand how they fill that gap and what role you're going to need to play in that as well. So with building your perfect college list, understanding the financial fit factors is key because it sets the foundation, as we said. So the unfortunate thing is many people, though, when it comes to financial aid, are overwhelmed. They hear a lot of things. They may start doing research online. They talk to people and they get very confused. We are going to try to mitigate that confusion and give you specific direction on how you can understand how financial aid may apply to your family for the schools that your child is applying to. So take a deep breath, relax. And again, this is not a race. We're going to do this with you together. So if you're one of those people that's not comfortable with finance, take your time, ask questions, and make sure that you get an understanding of your finances before you start this module. Financial fit factors. So a little levity here, but it's definitely very true. My net worth, do you mean after taxes or after I pay for your education? As I said before, college expenses are probably going to be one of the largest investments and expenses that you have in your lifetime. Other than a home, potentially buying a business, and the cars that you're going to buy throughout your lifetime, college can absolutely absorb and take on a major, significant role from a financial perspective if you don't understand how to go about it. College prices are absolutely inflated at this time. And there's still year over year increase of between 3 and 7% that on tuition that colleges have done. So it doesn't look like college expense is going to be going down anytime soon. So understanding, again, how colleges address financial aid, the type of match your student is to the schools that they apply to is going to be key to be successful as you go through the college application and admissions process. So to help create your family's financial criteria, here are some questions that we'd like to make sure that you know when this module is over. First, you need to understand what colleges truly cost. And what we mean by that is you need to understand not just the tuition, not just tuition and room and board, but the all-in cost for a college, including potentially travel if you're not local to the school that your child's interested in, books, and other types of expenses that a college might have. In addition, I just mentioned the 3 to 7% increase year over year. You should talk with the colleges that your student is interested in and understand what you can expect at the colleges that your child is applying to relative to an annual increase. And when we're figuring out the financial fit factors and whether or not a school is a good financial fit for you and your family, we should be looking at not 1 year, but the 4-year cost of the school. Now, I know that that could be a little bit overwhelming. However, when you see that number, you're going to have to plan for all 4 years. And it's very important that you understand and make sure that that is within your budget. Which, to the next point, is you have to understand what your family budget is in that capacity. Obviously, because your child goes to school, that doesn't mean that you necessarily won't have to pay your car payment and for gas and for food and a mortgage and taxes and all those types of things. So understanding where the money might come from, combination of hopefully what the school might offer, as well as loans, cash flow, investments, all those types of things is going to be very important so you understand and that you're prepared when your child applies to college. Do you know your EFC? EFC is expected family contribution, and it's very important that you know how that works, how that's calculated, and we're going to teach you that in this module. Do you know your monthly cash flow or budget? Very few people in this country actually manage their household on a budget. So it is some grunt work required to do this, but we strongly encourage you to try to figure out if there's any ability to pay for college and fill some of the gap if you have one based on cash flow. Many colleges nowadays make it very easy to take your money. They often will put you on a monthly payment plan. If you can match that monthly payment plan as best you can to your cash flow and to your budget, you might be able to make a significant dent in what you might owe the college. Do you know what loans are available and if you're eligible for them? We're going to talk a little bit about that, but it's very important to understand the process as well as to investigate and do your own research on what loans you might be eligible for. Have you had the financial conversation with your student family? This is very, very important. You know, it is a parent's responsibility to do the best they can to provide for their child. However, in addition, it is the child's responsibility to perform at the best level that they possibly can. And I'm sure many of our kids do. But they have to understand that they have a role in this as well. The higher their GPA, the higher their ACT or SAT scores, the more they consider schools aside from just the bumper sticker reputation, the better they're going to be able to qualify for financial aid and help offset the cost of college. So understanding the costs and details of how financial aid works is key, and Module 1 is going to teach you how to do that. So with that, how does financial aid work? I'm sure many of you have probably heard of a form called the FAFSA form. The FAFSA form is accepted by every school in the country, and it's used to allocate and establish your eligibility for federal aid that comes from the federal government that goes to the college. It includes resources of the parents and the student, and income is the main driver. Now, this is very important to note because, yes, assets are considered, but income by far is the number one driver relative to aid eligibility. We're going to show you at the end of this how to try to figure out the impact that assets and income have on your EFC. But it's very important, and this module is not meant, and actually this program is not meant to give you financial advice. However, it is important to understand that the income that you have on an annual basis, your AGI, your adjusted gross income on your tax return for federal tax return, that's the lower box on the lower right-hand side of the page of page 1. That is what's going to be the lead driver in your eligibility or lack thereof for financial aid. Oftentimes, your assets may not come into play at all. So you need to be very careful. And again, this is not meant to be a financial advisory course. We are not certified or registered to do that. However, you need to be careful not to make moves with your assets that may have a college benefit, and the key point there is may, but might not be in line with your overall financial goals. You need to make sure that whatever you do relative to your assets, that you talk to a professional, that you understand how it may impact you and your liquidity, as well as your ability to access and do things with the money from a flexibility standpoint going forward. But be very careful moving or reallocating assets without understanding how EFC works and how income is the main driver. In addition, probably sufficient to say here as well that money in the student's name and income that a student has could have considerable impact on financial aid eligibility. So it is important to understand that assets in a student's name, not a 529. A 529 is actually a parental asset. But other monies in your child's name may have a negative impact to financial aid eligibility. It's a universal application that you can send out to multiple schools when you fill it out once. And the first F, by the way, for FAFSA stands for free. So it's fafsa.ed.gov. That's where you want to go to get the FAFSA and investigate it and to eventually fill it out. If you Google FAFSA, you will come up, a lot of different sites may come up that will charge you $50, $75, $100. Please abandon those sites immediately. You want to go to the fafsa.ed.gov. It is a free form. You should never be paying to submit a FAFSA. It's released October 1st of your student's senior year. So you can go no matter where your student is now, and you can probably look and do some research and actually see what a FAFSA looks like. However, you're going to have to fill it out when your student is a senior, and it comes out again October 1st of your student's senior year. Now, on the right-hand side, you see something called the institutional methodology. There are a bunch of private schools in the country that do have endowments in dollars to share with families that are eligible. This institutional methodology is utilized to disperse institutional aid. It's a deeper dive into your assets. It does include retirement, your home value. It even asks the cars that you drive, with the ability to use that information in calculating your eligibility. Whereas the FAFSA is much more basic and doesn't go into your home value or your retirement assets or the car you drive. And the way most schools figure out the institutional methodology is with a form called the CSS profile. And the CSS profile you can review and preview on collegeboard.org. And we will show you how you can go about doing that. That form also is released October 1st of your student's senior year. So there's nothing you need to do right now if your child is not yet a senior, other than be familiar with the forms and maybe do a little bit of investigation of what the forms are asking so that you're prepared in the future to complete them. So you've heard me say EFC, expected family contribution. What is it? Well, you might not have any idea, but you're soon about to. Again, EFC stands for expected family contribution. It's the amount of money the college expects your family to contribute based upon you completing the FAFSA and or the CSS profile and entering in your income and your asset information. But the big deal about this is you need to understand that the EFC, your expected family contribution, the amount the college expects you to pay, is not necessarily all you'll be responsible for when it comes to paying for college. Because as you're about to see, colleges, as we said, one of the number 5 mistake that many families expect colleges to fill in the gap of money that they can't afford to pay or that they don't have. There's no obligation of the college to meet your need, if you even have need. And some of you, as you go through this process and you actually calculate your own EFC, you might be surprised that you might have more need than you expected or potentially less than you expected. But the bottom line is, you cannot make the mistake of calculating your EFC and think that it's the college's responsibility to make up the difference, because that's not how financial aid works. So let's go through an example here. Let's assume the total cost of attendance of a college is $40,000 a year. Let's say, based upon what you entered into the FAFSA, income, assets, that your EFC was $20,000 a year. By the way, whatever your EFC calculation is, it does come up on a year basis. Some people look at the number and think it's for all 4 years. EFC is calculated on 1 year eligibility. So if the total cost of attendance is $40,000 for a college, your expected family contribution is $20,000. Technically, you have need and you've qualified for need-based financial aid from the colleges that your child is applying to of $20,000 a year. Now, again, income is the biggest driver in this calculation. Remember, colleges have no obligation to give you that need of $20,000. They can give it to you some in loans. They could give it to you some in merit if they even offer merit programs, or they can ask you to go find the money yourself, which we will discuss and show you. Understanding how need is met at the colleges your child is applying to is key, but you need to do this before they apply, because finding out afterwards can set you up for disappointment. Need, again, could be met with free money or what they call self-help, which is basically loans. Unfortunately, cost of living is not considered in the formula. So regardless of you paying more because of where you live, whether you're in the Northeast or you're in Chicago, or you're in California, or you're in Texas, or wherever you are, is unfortunately not calculated into the program. Now, as we said, unfortunately, every year we see more and more and more families totally bewildered and surprised. They go through the process and they have a great student who got into great schools, and they don't understand why they didn't get the money that they thought they would be eligible for. How does everyone do this? My daughter got into her dream program, an amazing school, but the tuition is crazy. As much as I want her to go after her dream with everything she has, and this would help her get there. The idea of 4 years costing 6 figures, and you can see the emojis. So I either break her heart or break the bank. Not good options. Unfortunately, we see this on the Paying for College 101 Facebook page, as well as the Road to College Facebook page. And this can all be avoided and will be avoided if you go through the Build Your Perfect College List program efficiently. That's what we're here to do, to make sure you avoid that kind of heartbreak. So, you've heard this before, but remember, the college list drives financial aid. It drives everything, and it's very important, and that's why we're addressing it here. The colleges your student applies to will determine the financial aid they're eligible for or not. You can either receive more money or be required to pay more money. That's why we need to understand how financial aid works. Now, as doom and gloom as some of that may sound, in spite of what you've heard or will hear at our high school financial aid night, many of you will qualify for financial aid even though you think you earn too much. So I'm going to tell you right now, doesn't matter what your income is, you need to file the FAFSA and go through the financial aid process. Because no matter what your income is, if your child applies to the right types of schools where they're a decent academic match and where the school actually offers merit scholarships, no matter what your income is, no matter where or how many assets you have, you can absolutely qualify for free money and lower the total cost of tuition in school if you go through the process and apply to the right schools. Many colleges will compete for students by offering them money. Again, your student needs to be a good match at the school, and you have to make sure that you understand, again, how the college addresses financial aid. Colleges will pay for good students, but again, you need to make sure that all the schools on your child's list are not financial and academic reaches, because many schools that are a reach, and again, regardless, we're going to talk about how reaches are defined in future modules. But If schools are an academic reach, there's going to be less potential, not only for your child to get admitted, but also potentially for them to get money. So we'll discuss that in the next module. However, we need to make sure relative to this module that the schools that your child is applying to are not all financial reaches. So we have a little bit of homework here for you to do before you move on to the next module. Before you take the next step, please complete the worksheets for Module 1, which we will address in a second and take you through. We're asking that you also calculate your EFC using an online college cost calculator. Now, I'm going to just show you in this module a generic one on College Board that's available, but you should also look for some others, as well as use the financial aid calculators at the specific colleges that your child is applying to. Schools do now often have a financial aid calculator to give you a feel for what your child might be eligible for. I would not take it verbatim as gospel, as definite. However, it'll give you an idea and you can match those numbers against the generic EFC calculator you used online to see how that specific school might address things differently. You need to then compare your EFC to the budget you have determined for your family. Again, very important to have a family conversation and be aware of your finances before your child applies. Identify the gaps as well as the potential to fill those gaps, whether it be through the school or through your own self-help. Discuss your findings with the students and families so everybody's on the same page. Managing expectations is very, very important in life, never mind in the college application process. But I think, again, you as a family talking to your child and saying, with your blessing and with whatever criteria you all identify as most important, son or daughter, you can apply to whatever schools meet our criteria. However, you need to understand that cost is a consideration. And if the colleges that you apply to, some of them, do not come back with the financial aid that we would need to make it affordable and reasonable, that there's a possibility that you might not be able to attend. It is not a fun conversation to have. However, everybody should know that there's no carte blanche on this process, because unfortunately, you're going to plan, you're going to go through the modules, you're going to take the steps that we've identified and helping you with. But even with that, sometimes the financial aid that you receive can be uncertain and hard to estimate. And then most important, regardless of what your EFC comes back as you're doing this pre-work, regardless of what you find online, it is very important to speak with and talk to financial aid offices before your child applies to understand the options that may be available to you. Many parents feel like this is a step they don't want to do because they don't want to put their child in jeopardy of not being accepted as a result. I can assure you that that is not going to be the case. You do not need to feel guilty that your child was not accepted at one of the schools that you asked questions about, because if they were not accepted, it has nothing to do with the homework and the conversations that you're going to have with the financial aid offices. Okay. In addition, you should also have conversations with the admissions offices as well. At colleges, sometimes the financial aid office runs and manages all the purse strings for the college. And then other times it may be split between a financial aid office and admissions when merit comes into consideration. So don't just talk to financial aid. Financial aid's the place to start, and they will most likely tell you whether or not a conversation with admissions would be beneficial as well to get the holistic picture of how their college addresses financial aid. Now, what we're going to do here now is we're going to actually take you through the worksheets. So the worksheet here, as you see, and I'm not going to go line by line, but basically gives you some terms as well as gives you a idea of the kind of assets and kind of things that you should be considering and understanding as you're charting out your budget and what funds you have available potentially for college. Income, Obviously, as we talked about, the number one driver. Some of you may have some of these other things, such as a 529 or a prepaid tuition plan or covered L's or any of those other types of things. If you don't have those, don't worry about it. Likewise, if you have other investments, you can easily replace those other investments with the ones that have here or vice versa. Now, also, if you look on the right-hand side, right here, the federal loan limits. This is specific to the Stafford loan. The Stafford loan is a loan and the only loan your child will be able to get without any help from you as a parent. Oftentimes we hear parents say, well, listen, if she wants to go to this school, if he wants to go to this school, he's going to have to take out loans. That is not going to be the case. And even if they take out a loan with your help that you co-sign, essentially, it is still your loan. So the Stafford loan is the only loan that your child can take out without any help from you because it's specifically for students and backed by the federal government. But very, very key point here is if you as a family do not file the FAFSA, your child will not be eligible for the Stafford loan. So no FAFSA, no Stafford loan. You'll see the numbers are not dramatic. 5,500 freshman year, 6,500 sophomore year, and 7,500 for up to the next several years. Now, that's not a lot. However, it might help offset and ease from a cash flow perspective, the expense that you have in a current year. So again, very important to file the FAFSA, despite what anybody says. There's 4 reasons to file a FAFSA. Reason number 1, we just went through, is eligibility for a Stafford loan. Reason number 2 to file a FAFSA is there's something called a PLUS loan, P-L-U-S. It's a loan for parents that's also backed by the federal government for education. If you do not file a FAFSA, you are not going to be eligible for the PLUS loan. Third reason is if you do have need, filing a FAFSA might make your student eligible for work study. Work study is a job that your student would have on campus. And typically it's not a heavy lifting job, 10 to 15 hours a week. And that could be either a tuition discount based on the hours that your student does, or a check in dollars that they actually have in their pocket to spend while they're on campus. But the bottom line is, if you do not file a FAFSA, no Stafford loan, no FAFSA, no PLUS loan, no FAFSA, no eligibility for work study. And the most important reason to file a FAFSA is some colleges will not even consider your child for merit money. That's the money that everybody wants, the free money based on the academic achievement of your child, as well as the match that they are academically to that school. Many schools will not offer any merit whatsoever unless you file a FAFSA and go through their financial aid process. So I can't emphasize more, no matter how much money you make or have, definitely make sure that you file a FAFSA. It is not going to hurt your child's ability to get accepted. It is important, though, to file it because that's the way you can optimize your financial aid eligibility. Now, we're going to talk to you about how to calculate your EFC in a second, but wanted to see and make sure you went through our checklist, because by the time you're done and completed Module 1, your answer should be yes to every single one of these checkboxes. If not, please go back to the module, to certain aspects, re-listen to it, do some additional work, and make sure that you don't move on to Module 2 until and unless the checkboxes for all of these questions is yes. Now, we're going to go from here to talking about the EFC calculator. So this is collegeboard.org. You see it right up here. And all I did was in the search bar here, put EFC calculator, and this is where we are. Now, I already put things together here, pre-populated, and we're not going to go through it step by step. However, there's obviously some status, some formula, some family information, and student information, and then there's the finances. So let's just go to the finances at the moment. I just put in here adjusted gross income of $120,000, $60,000 by each parent, and then I put some assets down in the bottom. Now, what you can do to verify what I was talking about before as to what role assets play versus income, you can put your income on top here and zero out the assets and calculate your EFC. Then go back and populate the assets to represent what you do have and see what the impact is. Now, again, that's not to say that it won't be some impact, because it will. However, again, I think you might be surprised at what is the driving factor, which again is typically your income. Now, if you look at the results, the federal methodology, the FAFSA, calculated your EFC as $15,000. The institutional methodology calculated your EFC at $16,000. So essentially what it means is that for schools' federal money, they expect you to pay the first $15,000, and then you would have some need eligibility. For schools that have endowments and have institutional money to give, in addition to potentially the income that you have that would be allocated towards college, they're expecting you to come up with the first $16,000 of eligibility for institutional funds. So again, these numbers are based upon the income and the assets that we put into the finance column. Now, when you look at these numbers, that sounds all well and good, but what does it really mean? So let's give an actual school example. I just picked randomly Syracuse University. And actually, I guess it's not so random, because I picked it because of a couple things, which I'm going to show you momentarily. So first off, College Board has a lot of great information here, but relative to financing, you'd want to be clicking here on Paying tab. And you'll notice here, right now, in-state costs are highlighted, but out-of-state and in-state are exactly the same because this is a private school. When you click here on how to apply for financial aid, you'll notice right here the financial aid forms, the CSS profile we talked about before, as well as the FAFSA. So both forms are going to be required for financial aid purposes because this is a private school that gets federal money from the government, but also has endowments and institutional money that they might be willing to part with. So both forms need to be filled out here. Now, financial aid by the numbers helps you understand, because remember, I said that just because you have need doesn't mean that the college is obligated to fulfill that need. So right here, Syracuse is very generous in that they meet 98% of your need. So it's the full tuition, room and board, total cost of college, minus that $16,000. And therefore, whatever's left, which we're going to take you through in a second, they will meet 98% of that need. But again, them meeting 98% does not guarantee they're going to give you all that money, which is what this pie chart is right here. This institution meets 77% of the 98% with scholarships and grants, free money, very generous. They meet 23% of the 98% that they decide that they're going to meet with loans and or jobs. That's basically what they call self-help. So again, this school is very gratuitous when it comes to meeting need. And of the need that they meet, they're very generous in that 77% of it is money you most likely won't have to pay back. But there's still other dollars open here that are going to be added back to your cost of attendance. And I'm going to take you through that momentarily. Another place to look here is to look at the average non-need-based aid. That means you have no need, but if your student gets accepted, typically Syracuse gives up to $9,000 for a student that is accepted. Now, that doesn't mean your student is going to get up to that amount. That doesn't mean your student's going to only get that amount, but that is the average non-need based aid, meaning that regardless of your income, regardless of your assets, you may be eligible for, or your student may be eligible for, up to $9,000 a year in some kind of aid. Now, this is just one example. I highly encourage you to go through other schools. And again, you can go to collegeboard.org and you can find colleges easily by putting the college name in the search bar, and each college in the country will come up. And you'll be able to do the same thing by clicking on paying and looking at the numbers and understand how colleges address financial aid. This is the first step to educating yourself on how it's done. And then you want to verify that information when you are actually talking to financial aid and admissions, as we did as part of your homework. Now, what we're going to do here is, because I know it may be a little confusing, I want to take specifically the Syracuse example and make sure you understand what all that 98% of need met and 77% and all that actually nets out to you. So in this example, the total cost of Syracuse University was $73,000, again, regardless of your in-state or out-of-state. Your EFC, depending on the school, but was between 15 and 16. I used around 15 just for easy illustration's sake. Therefore, you have a need of $58,000. But as we said, Syracuse and any other school doesn't need to give you that money. But Syracuse was very, very generous, as we saw in the numbers. They meet 98% of that need. So that's $56,840 that they meet. But obviously that's lower than the $58,000 of need you have. So therefore the difference, $58,000 minus the $56,840, is the 2% that they are not going to meet, which falls back on you. Then if you remember, of the 98% of need met, 77%, another generous high number, was scholarships and free money. That's approximately $43,800. But there's also 23% that the school had of loans and what they call self-help. That equated to $13,000. So if you add all the red boxes together, you are going to have to pay out of pocket a minimum of $29,233 for Syracuse University. Now, that is a tremendous discount off of the $73,000 sticker price. However, if that number is still outside of your budget, you need to make sure that you have conversations with Syracuse University and try to find out what the likelihood is of you hitting that number or being able to do better before your child applies, so you understand exactly what you're getting into. So that was just one example. I hope that that was helpful. I would use this formula here for any school that you are going to consider. Once you do your homework and understand and find out your EFC, as well as these other numbers, you can plug the numbers into the other schools you're considering, and that's how you can get an estimate of your total out-of-pocket expense. And again, remember though, this is not an exact science. These are numbers based on history and data and self-reported information by the schools. You will need to verify this, but this is a whole lot more detail than what most people do when they go through this process. And you will be an educated consumer and know what questions to ask of the colleges that your child's considering to identify and make sure that the financial aid fit factors are reasonable for you, your student, and your family. Good luck. Go back to this module as many times as you need to. Ask the questions of financial aid and admissions and document your findings.